What if Pycelle refused to poison Jon Arryn and sent a raven to Ned Stark, warning him of the Lannisters? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The candle has burned low. It is deep in the night, and the Red Keep is quiet. And Grand Maester Pycelle stands in the doorway of the Hand's chambers and watches the old man breathe. Jon Arryn lies beneath 3 wool blankets, his face the color of old parchment. He is breathing. That is the thing that matters. That is the thing that still surprises Pycelle, 3 days on. That Jon Arryn is still breathing. The tears of loss is a slow poison, colorless and tasteless, and nearly impossible to detect, and Jon had swallowed enough of it to kill a younger man twice over. But Jon Arryn is stubborn, even in dying. He breathes. In the far corner of the room, the attending Maester works quietly, mixing the next draught of the purge treatment, his young hands steady over a small clay bowl. Pycelle is 81 years old. He has served the Iron Throne since before most of the men in this city were born. He has outlasted 3 kings. He has forged his chain in the heat of Old Town, link by link, one discipline at a time, and he has worn it through 4 reigns without once doubting that survival belongs to those who serve the powerful, not the just. He has been in the Lannisters' service since 283 AC. He thinks of Cersei now. She had come to him in the early evening, before the last light faded from the narrow windows of the Red Keep. She had not threatened him. She never threatened him. She did not need to. She had simply stood in his chambers with all her golden patience, green eyes steady, and she had told him what was needed. The attending Maester was to be sent away. Milk of the poppy only, to ease the Hand's passage. She had held his gaze for a moment when he nodded, the way she always did, making sure the message had landed. 15 years of small things. And then one more. Pycelle moves to the door of Jon Arryn's chamber. The attending Maester does not look up. Pycelle puts his hand on the doorframe and stands there for a moment, preparing the words. He has dismissed healers before. There is a formula to it. There is a formula to everything in this life. He opens his mouth, and then he stops. Jon Arryn stirs beneath the blankets. His lips move. No sound comes out, but Pycelle has spent enough nights in this room to know the shape of the words. He has seen them form 12 times. The old man reaches for something in the dark, some understanding he had found just before the poison took him, and has been trying to hold on to ever since. The seed is strong. Pycelle closes his mouth. He does not speak. He knows what those words mean. He has known for weeks, in truth, since before Jon Arryn fell ill, since he saw what the old Hand was reading and understood where the inquiry was leading. The lineages and histories of the great houses of the 7 kingdoms, the passages on Baratheon inheritance, the quiet visits to the Street of Steel, to the smithy where a black-haired boy worked the forge. Jon Arryn had been thorough, more thorough than Pycelle had expected from a man of his age. The seed is strong. Jon breathes. The attending Maester looks up from his work. His eyes are young and anxious in the candlelight. He has been at this without enough sleep for 3 days straight. He looks at Pycelle and waits. "Continue," Pycelle says. "The purge treatment. Continue it through the night." The young Maester nods and turns back to his bowl. Pycelle withdraws from the doorway. He moves through the corridors of the Red Keep with the slow, careful shuffle of a very old man who has a great deal to think about. His chambers are not far. He goes to them and shuts the door and sits at his writing table and stares at the candle. He is thinking about 15 years. He is thinking about the sack of King's Landing. The morning Tywin Lannister's forces had come to the gates, and Pycelle had gone to King Aerys and advised him, gently, and with all his measured skill, to open them. That had been the first great service, and afterward, through all the years of Robert's reign, there had been others. Small reports dispatched south to Casterly Rock, favourable omissions from his accounts to the small council, a word here, a silence there. The machinery of loyalty, turned toward gold and favour and the continued goodwill of the most powerful house in Westeros. He had never thought of it as treachery. He had thought of it as survival. Now he sits at his writing table and looks at the blank parchment and thinks, Jon Arryn has not betrayed anyone. Jon Arryn has simply been doing his job. He has been serving the realm, which is what a hand of the king is supposed to do, and the reward for that service is that a woman poured poison into his wine. Pycelle takes out a fresh quill. He dips it. He writes quickly, with a steady hand that surprises him. His name at the top. Lord Eddard Stark, Winterfell, at the heading. Then the facts, plainly stated. The hand lives, but barely. The poison was tears of Lys, from the free city of Lys. Jon Arryn had discovered the secret before he fell ill. The Queen's children are not the King's children. The golden hair and the green eyes belong to another man entirely, and that man stands guard over Robert's own person, wearing a white cloak. He names the evidence Jon gathered, the lineages book and its passages on Baratheon inheritance, the visits Jon made to Robert's black-haired bastards around the city, the phrase the hand keeps reaching for in his fever. The seed is strong. He explains what those words mean. Every bastard Robert Baratheon has sired carries the mark of his house in dark hair and strong jaw, and not one of the 3 children sleeping in the royal apartments tonight does. He writes the name he shouldn't write. He writes it anyway. He folds the parchment and seals it with his chain's own wax, pressing the Grand Maester's impression firmly into the soft seal. Then he sits for a moment with the letter in his hands, feeling its weight, which is much greater than its paper and ink. He goes to the rookery before dawn. The ravens are restless at night, shuffling and murmuring on their perches in the dark. Pycelle moves among them with his small oil lamp until he finds the bird he wants, the Winterfell raven. He ties the letter to its leg with careful fingers that do not shake, which perhaps they should. He carries the bird to the narrow window and holds it up to the opening. The air outside is cold and smells of the sea and smoke and the 1,000 other things that make up King's Landing at this hour. The city is dark below him. The harbour is dark. The only other light he can see is the lamp burning across the yard in the chambers of the hand, where the attending master is still at work. He opens his hands. The raven goes, a dark shape against a darker sky, and then nothing. Pycelle stands at the window for a long while, looking north in the direction the bird went. He does not know exactly what he has set in motion. He knows it will not be quiet. He knows that when 2 days have passed, and Jon Arryn still has not died, Cersei will understand that something has gone wrong, and her green eyes will move across the faces of the people around her, the way they always do when she is looking for the source of a problem. He goes back to his chambers. He does not sleep. In Jon Arryn's room, the attending Maester works on through the dark hours, and the hand of the king breathes. The raven is past the city walls now, climbing north into the cold air above the King's Road, carrying its small folded weight toward Winterfell. 4 days at least, perhaps 5, in weather like this. Dawn comes slowly to King's Landing. It finds the crystal dome of the Great Sept, and the towers of the Red Keep, and the cold thread of the river below. It finds Pycelle sitting at his writing table, with his hands folded in his lap, and his chain resting cold against his chest, and his eyes open, waiting for what comes next. 2 days after the Raven goes north, Jon Arryn is still alive. The attending Maester has not left his side except to sleep in the small anteroom. The purge treatment has done what it can. It has not pulled the tears of lies back out of blood that has already taken it up, but it has slowed the poison's work and bought the old man time, and time is all a man has ever needed to prove the physicians wrong. Jon Arryn lies in the great carved bed with his blankets drawn up high and the fire burning in the grate, and his breathing is shallow, but it is there, and the city of King's Landing goes on outside the window, without any idea that the hand of the king is waging the quietest fight of his long life. Pycelle comes to him in the early afternoon, when the attending Maester steps out to take his midday meal. He pulls a chair close to the bedside and sits. The room smells of the herbs the master uses for the purge draughts, sharp and bitter, and of tallow and the particular damp chill that settles into stone rooms in autumn. He listens to Jon breathe. Jon's eyes open. They are clouded and distant, filmed with exhaustion and the slow work of the poison, but they are open. He looks at Pycelle without speaking, and Pycelle looks back at him, and between two old men who have served this realm for a combined lifetime, very little needs to be said aloud. His lips move. "The seed is strong," Pycelle says quietly, before the words can form. "I know. I have known for some time." Jon Arryn's eyes do not change in expression, but something in them settles, the way a man settles when he has been carrying a weight alone for too long, and someone has at last acknowledged what it is. Pycelle leans close. "I have sent word north," he says, his voice shaped for no one else in the room. "To Lord Stark at Winterfell. He will know what Jon Arryn knew." Jon closes his eyes. His hands move slightly on the blanket, the fingers curling once and then going still. The breath that comes out of him is long and slow. The next one that comes in is steadier than the last. Pycelle sits with him for a few minutes more. It is, he thinks, the most useful thing he has done in 15 years. He rises eventually and goes. Meanwhile, in her chambers in the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister receives the news. The servant delivers it in a single sentence. The hand's condition is improving. He will likely recover. Her face does not move. She is 32 years old, and she is beautiful in the cold afternoon light, her golden hair loose around her shoulders, her green eyes doing the thing they always do when a problem arrives, moving, calculating, assessing angles with a patience that her face never betrays. She sits in her chair by the window and she thinks. The hand lives. Someone did not do what was asked. She runs through the possibilities quickly. The attending Maester could have found a treatment that worked against all expectation, or someone could have chosen to let that treatment continue when it was supposed to be stopped. She thinks of Pycelle. The old man has served the Lannisters since before Cersei herself came to King's Landing. He has been reliable through 15 years of small services, each one a thread in a web that has kept her family's interests protected at every turn. He has always understood perfectly well on which side his survival lay. That he might refuse a direct request is not something she had considered. Something went wrong. She does not yet know what, and she cannot press Pycelle about it, not directly, because Robert is already watching everything in the Red Keep with the raw, unfocused attention of a man who nearly lost his oldest friend, and a conversation between the Grand Maester and the Queen about why the hand did not die will not go unnoticed. She cannot move against Jon Arryn now. The window has closed. Robert is too present, too watchful, too loudly relieved. Any further accident to the hand will be examined from every direction, and there is no direction from which it will not look like what it is. She is patient. She has always been patient. It is the quality she values most in herself and understands least in others. She will have to wait. She will have to watch. Cersei rises from her chair and goes to find her brother. The White Sword Tower stands in the inner ward of the Red Keep, and Jaime keeps his small Kingsguard quarters there when he is not standing at the king's side. She goes to him in the late afternoon, when the corridor outside is empty. He opens the door before she knocks. He is tall and golden, and he moves through a room the way he moves through everything, as if it has already been arranged for his convenience. He reads her face before she speaks. "How long?" he asks. 3 days. The Maester says he will recover. She steps inside, and he closes the door. "We cannot touch him now." "Cersei." There is warning in his voice, though not the kind she needs warning about. "Robert is in the keep," she says. "Robert is watching everything. If Jon Arryn so much as takes a fever in the next fortnight, Robert will pull this keep apart, stone by stone, trying to understand it, and I am not going to be found at the end of that." Jaime is quiet for a moment. His jaw tightens in the way it does when he is restraining himself. If Jon speaks to Robert before we know what he has already told, he is too weak to speak. He will not always be. Cersei looks at him. He holds her gaze. The room is very still. "We wait," she says. "We learn what went wrong. We move when we understand what we are moving against." Jaime turns to the window. It is not agreement. It is the thing just short of agreement, which is generally what she gets from him when she asks him to be patient. She does not press him for more than that. She goes. Meanwhile, in the small council chamber, Petter Baelish sits with a scroll of grain shipments from the Reach and a cup of wine, and his eyes making a slow, careful circuit of the room. He received the news an hour ago from a woman who works in the Hand's kitchens and has been on his payroll for 3 years. The Hand is alive. The purge treatment is holding. He had turned this over carefully before coming down to council, and he is turning it over still. He looks at Pycelle. The Grand Maester sits in his customary place with his long white hair and his heavy chain and his expression of mild, ancient authority, and he gives no sign of anything at all. He has always been very good at this. Baelish respects the craft of it, at a distance, the way he respects most useful tools. But something went wrong, and the only man in a position to make it go wrong was the one sitting across this table. He thinks about Lysa's letter. That part went exactly as designed. Lysa had done what was asked of her, and then she had written north to her sister and placed the blame on Lannister hands, and by now the letter had arrived, or was arriving at Winterfell. That thread was already pulled. That thread could not be unpulled. Whatever happened to Jon Arryn, Catelyn Tully had been handed a reason to fear and distrust the Lannisters, and Ned Stark had been handed a reason to come south. But Jon Arryn was supposed to be dead. The plan required it. Jon Arryn dead meant a new hand needed, meant Robert riding north to his oldest friend, meant Ned Stark brought into the trap already half convinced the Lannisters had murdered a man he loved. The grief and the suspicion and the southward journey were all supposed to follow naturally from the corpse. The corpse has not cooperated. Baelish sets down his cup. He turns a page of the scroll and reads nothing on it. He will find out what Pycelle has done. He always finds out. And then he will decide what to do about it. Meanwhile, across the Red Keep in his own apartments, Robert Baratheon is standing at his window with a cup in his hand and a look on his face that the page in the corner is deeply glad not to have been the one to destroy. Robert is happy. He is the specific and total kind of happy that fills him up all the way, leaving no room for anything complicated. He's going to live, Robert says, not particularly to the page or to anyone. The stubborn old man is going to live. He drains the cup and holds it out without looking. Fill it, and find something good to eat. Not whatever it is they serve at council. The page scrambles to comply. Robert goes back to the window. He has known Jon Arryn since he was a boy. The eyrie, the mountains, the old lord's patient discipline, and the way he had of looking at Robert that made Robert feel, for the first time in his life, that someone expected something of him worth expecting. Robert had not always lived up to it. He knows this, but Jon had kept expecting it anyway, and that is not a small thing. That is not the kind of thing a man sets aside. Jon is going to live. Robert says it again, quietly, to the window, to King's Landing, spread out below him in the late light. He will still ride north. Jon will need weeks to recover, and in the meanwhile Ned Stark is sitting at Winterfell at the edge of winter, and they haven't seen each other in years. Robert has been meaning to go for years. There has always been something that prevented it. There will not be something this time. He sets down the cup and goes to find a maester to write the orders for the journey north. Catelyn reads her sister's letter alone in the Godswood, standing between the roots of the great heart tree, with the afternoon light fallen grey and cold through the canopy above. The weirwood is ancient, its bark the colour of old bone, and its leaves the deep red of autumn turned further, past where autumn should stop. The face carved into its trunk has watched over Winterfell for thousands of years, and the red sap that runs down from those carved eyes into the dark pool below might be weeping or might simply be the nature of the tree. Catelyn is a woman of the faith. She has never felt entirely comfortable in this place, among the old gods that her husband and his people worship, through roots and stone rather than prayers and candles. But the Godswood is the most private place in Winterfell, and Lysa's letter is not the kind of thing she wants to read where anyone might look over her shoulder. She reads it twice. Lysa has written in a careful, compressed hand, the letters small and close together, as if she wanted to take up as little space on the parchment as possible, or as if she were frightened of how large the truth might look if it were given room to breathe. Jon was poisoned. The Lannisters are responsible. Tell no one, especially not Robert. The underlining of that last instruction is so forceful it has torn slightly through the parchment on the other side. Catelyn stands with the letter and listens to the Godswood. Jon Arryn. Jon, who took Ned and Robert in as boys and gave them the patient, daily education that made them into the men they became. Jon, who has been the steady hand behind Robert's unsteady reign for 15 years, the foundation the king has stood on without ever quite noticing. She has met him only a few times in her life, but she knows what Ned thinks of him, and that is enough. The idea that the Lannisters have poisoned Jon Arryn sits in her chest like a stone that has not finished falling. The instruction to tell no one troubles her almost as much as the accusation itself. Lysa has always been a woman frightened of things, but this is a different kind of frightened. This is the frightened of someone who knows exactly what she is saying and exactly what it costs to say it. Catelyn does not know what to do with that yet. She folds the letter and tucks it close to her body and goes back to the keep. 4 days later, a second raven arrives from King's Landing. The castle maester brings it to Ned in his solar. The seal pressed into the wax is the Grand Maester's, an impression Ned has seen on official correspondence enough times to know at a glance. He takes it, sets it on the desk, and looks at it for a moment. Then he breaks the seal and reads. He is standing when he starts. By the time he finishes, he has sat down without noticing. He reads it a second time, slowly, from the beginning. When he is done, he puts the letter on the desk and sits with his hands flat against the wood and his grey eyes on nothing in particular. The fire in the grate is burning low. He does not move to feed it. He sits for a while and thinks about what the letter means and what it requires, and then he goes to find Catelyn. She is in the great hall, going over the household accounts with the steward. She looks up when Ned comes in. He does not often appear in the great hall at this hour, and his face is the face he wears when he has something to say that he has not yet found the right words for. "Leave us," she tells the steward, who is experienced enough to go without delay. Ned sits down across from her. He takes 2 letters from his coat, Lysa's, which Catelyn had given him 3 days ago, and Pycelle's, and lays them on the table between them. Catelyn takes Pycelle's letter and reads it carefully. The Grand Maester's hand is old and slightly uneven, the letters formed with the pressure of a man writing quickly and with purpose. Jon Arryn was poisoned with tears of Liz, a poison from the free city of Liz, nearly undetectable and slow in its working. Jon Arryn lives, but only barely. Jon Arryn had discovered a secret before he fell ill, a secret someone powerful wanted him to carry to his grave. The Queen's children are not the King's children. The golden hair and the green eyes that mark all 3 of them belong to a man who stands at Robert's right hand and wears a white cloak. Below the Grand Maester's seal, in a hand that wavers slightly more than the rest, 4 words. She recognizes them. Lysa had mentioned them in her letter only in passing, as something Jon had been saying in his fever, and had not known what to make of them. Catelyn puts the letter down. "The 2 letters agree on one thing," Ned says. "Jon was poisoned, and the Lannisters are at the center of it." "They disagree on everything else that matters," she says. "Lysa says Jon is dead. Pycelle says he lives. Lysa says the Lannisters killed him. Pycelle says the Lannisters committed something far worse than murder, and that Jon still breathes." Ned picks up Pycelle's letter. His eyes go to the last line. "The seed is strong," he says. He says it quietly, the way a man says something he has been turning in his mind for hours, setting it down to see what weight it carries. Catelyn looks at him. She is Catelyn Tully, raised at River Run, bred from childhood to read the hidden language of blood and alliance and inheritance. She knows about the Baratheon line, the dark hair that runs through it without exception in legitimate children and bastards alike, as consistent as winter. She knows what the Queen's children look like. She has seen the court portraits. She has thought the thought before, in passing moments, and always put it away because some thoughts are too large and too dangerous to let stand in daylight. She does not put it away this time. "Ned," she says. "I know." She chooses her next words carefully. "If Pycelle is telling the truth, you are holding the most dangerous letter in the 7 kingdoms. And if he is lying, if someone is using him to put a weapon in your hands against the Lannisters, that is also dangerous." "He is not lying," Ned says. "A man who sends a false letter like this gains nothing. He makes himself an enemy of the most powerful family in the realm, and hands Ned Stark the power to destroy him if the lie is discovered. That is not how men like Pycelle survive." "Then what do we do?" "Wait," Ned says. "Robert is already on the King's Road. He rode north at least a week ago. I am going to send a rider south to find his party and urge haste. When Robert arrives, I put both letters in his hands and let him read them himself." "And if he does not believe them?" "Jon Arryn is still alive. When the time comes, Jon can speak. Catelyn looks at the 2 letters side by side on the table. Lysa's cramped, frightened hand. Pycelle's old, deliberate one. She thinks of Ned riding south into King's Landing alone, with this letter in his pocket, and Lannister eyes on every side of him. "Be careful," she says. Ned looks at her. "I will." He goes to arrange the rider. Catelyn stays at the table for a long while after he has gone, the 2 letters in front of her and the sounds of the castle around her, and she thinks about her sister, frightened in the Eyrie, and the Queen with her green eyes, and what it means to be a woman who has stumbled into the truth. Later, when the rider is gone and the afternoon light has turned the color of iron, Ned stands at the window of his solar and watches the yard below. Robb comes up the stairs with mud on his boots and the easy stride of a boy who has spent his morning at the practice yard and has not thought about anything more complicated than sword work. He stops in the doorway when he sees his father standing at the window. "Father, shall I come back? Go practice your sword work, Robb." Ned does not turn around. His voice is even and quiet, the voice of a man whose attention is somewhere else entirely. Robb hears it and goes without another word, the way he has learned to go when his father uses that tone. Below, in the far corner of the yard, a lean boy works through a sword form alone, unhurried and precise. Dark hair, grey eyes, stark in his colouring and in the set of his jaw, and nothing else about him to catch the eye unless you are standing at a window, looking for something to rest on while you think about other things. "Ned's bastard," the castle says. Ned's bastard and nothing more, because Ned Stark has never permitted anything more to be said. And in the north, what Ned Stark permits and does not permit is the end of the discussion. Jon Snow works through the form again. He does not know he is being watched. Ned watches him anyway, and after a while lets it be what it is, and turns back to his desk. The banners ride out ahead of the column on the King's Road, the crowned black stag of House Baratheon on gold, and behind it, the golden lion of House Lannister on crimson, both standards catching the cold autumn wind off the hills and snapping in the grey air above the column. Robert Baratheon rides at the head of it all, and whatever the years have done to him, whatever the feasting and the wine and the long boredom of a throne have put on his frame and taken from the lines of his face, there is still something in the way he fills a saddle that speaks of the man he once was. He is broad and thick, and his black beard has more grey in it than it used to, and the war horse under him is the kind of horse a smaller man would be afraid of, and Robert sits it like a man who does not consider it a particularly interesting animal. The demon of the trident. 15 years ago he hammered Rhaegar Targaryen to death at the Ruby Ford and ended a dynasty, and the kingdom has been waiting ever since to see if he could manage the victory as well as he managed the war. Behind him the column stretches back along the road. Wagons, knights, servants, standard-bearers. In the middle of it, unhurried and golden and watching everything, the Queen. Cersei Lannister rides with a face as composed as dressed stone. She has been watching Robert for 3 days since the rider came from Ned Stark, and she has still not determined what the rider said. Robert had dismissed the man quickly and ordered faster pace, and he has not spoken to her since, and he has not stopped smiling, and that combination is one she does not know how to read. Robert smiling and silent is not Robert in a good mood. It is Robert with something pressing on him that he is carrying alone. She watches the road. She watches him. She thinks about what Ned Stark could have written that would make Robert smile like that and not tell her, and she cannot arrive at a comfortable answer. She waits. They receive Ned's rider some days north of the Neck, where the land opens up and the sky gets bigger and colder, and the King's Road cuts through flat grey country that does not care about the affairs of the south. The rider is travel-worn and delivers his message briefly. "Come quickly." Ned Stark asks the king to ride with haste to Winterfell. Robert's brow comes together. He looks at the rider for a moment, something shifting behind his eyes that is not quite worry, but has the shape of it. Then he turns in the saddle and calls down the column to move faster. Cersei watches this from 3 horse lengths back. She watches the set of his shoulders and the way he sits forward slightly, as if he can hurry the animal by, leaning into it. He does not look at her. That night they camp in a field beside the King's Road, fires going in a rough circle, the servants putting up pavilions, and the horses picketed in rows. Robert sits with Renly near the largest fire, and his voice carries over the whole camp, too loud and too much, filling all available space and spilling over the edges of it. He is telling some story from the years before the throne. Renly is laughing. Cersei stands at the edge of the firelight and watches them for a while, the king and his youngest brother, and she thinks, he is not telling that story because he is happy. He is telling it because he does not want to think. She goes to find Jaime. He is at the edge of the camp near the horse lines, where the torchlight does not quite reach. He sees her coming and does not speak until she is close. "Something happened at Winterfell," she says. "Robert has been different since that rider arrived. Quieter than he should be." Jaime looks out at the horses. "Ned Stark sent a rider south to find us on the road. That is unusual. What if Jon sent a raven directly to Stark before he lost consciousness?" Jaime is quiet for a moment. That would explain it. "That would mean Pycelle failed," Cersei says. The camp noise fills the space between them. Robert's laugh cuts across it, carrying through the dark, big and easy and entirely wrong. "We do not know what Pycelle has or has not done," Jaime says. "No." She looks at the lights of the camp. "When we arrive at Winterfell, I want you close." Jaime does not answer, which is his way of saying yes. Winterfell rises on its hill in the grey afternoon of the 4th day, its twin curtain walls the colour of old iron, and its towers catching the light off the low clouds. The gates are open. The outriders have gone ahead, and when the column arrives in the outer yard, the household of House Stark is assembled and waiting. Ned Stark stands at the front of them. Robert sees him from 50 feet out, and his face does something immediate and unguarded, the look of a man who has been missing something for a long time without quite admitting to himself how much. He is off his horse before the column has fully stopped, moving with more speed than his size suggests, and he crosses the yard and takes Ned by both arms and then pulls him into an embrace like a collision. Ned Stark is not a small man, but Robert Baratheon is considerably larger, and the Lord of Winterfell takes the impact with the expression of a man who knew it was coming and braced for it anyway. Robert's laugh fills the yard. It is the real one, not the fireside performance, full-throated and undisguised, and the yard's stone walls catch it and throw it back. For a moment, in the cold northern air, it sounds like relief. Catelyn stands a step behind her husband, auburn-haired and blue-eyed and composed, watching the King of the Seven Kingdoms hold her husband, the way an old friend holds a man he thought he might lose. Behind her, the Stark children are arranged in a line with the inexact precision of children who have been instructed to stand in a line. Robert 15 is already nearly his father's height, auburn of hair and grey-eyed, with the straight-backed bearing of a boy who has been told all his life what he will one day be, and has taken it seriously. Sansa, at 12, beside him, Tully colouring, her blue eyes bright with the particular alertness of a girl who has been told the Crown Prince is coming and is busy forming her first impressions. Bran at 8 on her other side, craning to see past his sister. At the end of the line, small and brown-haired, with grey eyes that take in everything and give back very little, Arya. Jon Snow stands a half-step apart from the line, the way he always stands a half-step apart from things that are not quite his to be part of. Dark-haired, grey-eyed, 15, watching the whole arrival with the careful attention of a boy who has learned not to miss things. Robert releases Ned and turns to the assembled household, and the introductions are made with the usual order and ceremony. Cersei steps forward, all golden grace and gracious manner. Jaime beside her, tall and golden in his armor, the white Kingsguard cloak falling from his shoulders. And behind them, Joffrey, 14 years old, golden-haired and green-eyed, handsome in the way of portraits, every feature clean and well-made, and somehow not quite warm. Ned looks at them. He looks at Cersei. Long golden hair, green eyes. He looks at Jaime. Golden hair, green eyes. He looks at Joffrey. Golden hair, green eyes. Lannister colouring, all three, complete and unbroken, without a trace of the black hair and strong jaw that Robert Baratheon puts on every child whose blood he touches. He has the letter in his mind. He has had it there since the afternoon it arrived, the Grand Maester's old deliberate handwriting and those 4 words beneath the seal. He looks at Joffrey, 14 years old and golden-haired in the middle of the Winterfell yard, and he thinks about what those words mean, and he keeps his face entirely still. Robert, standing beside him with his hand on Ned's shoulder, is still smiling. The feast that evening fills the great hall from end to end. Robert eats and drinks at the kind of scale that makes the Winterfell servants exchange glances, and his voice is the center of the room the way it always is, the thing all other conversations arrange themselves around or against. Ned has seated Renly next to Catelyn, and Renly's easy charm does its efficient work on her. Sansa has been placed near enough to the Crown Prince to catch occasional glimpses, and is catching them with wide eyes and careful study, forming judgments she will likely not share until she has formed them completely. Bran has found the gallery above the hall and watches the whole affair from there, content with his high vantage. Arya is gone from her seat before the first remove is finished. No one appears surprised. Ned goes to Robert's chambers before the castle is fully awake, while the corridors are still the grey of early morning, and the servants have only just begun to move through them. Robert is already conscious, which is not what Ned expected from a man who drank what he drank the night before. He is sitting on the edge of his bed in his rumpled clothes, black hair tangled, blue eyes the colour of old iron, and he looks at Ned the way a man looks at the first problem of a day that has not yet decided how bad it intends to be. It is early, Ned. I know. Ned looks at him. Come walk with me. Robert stares at him. Something in Ned's face makes the morning complaint not worth finishing. The gods would, Robert says. It is not quite a question. Yes. Robert looks at the ceiling for a moment. Then he gets up. They do not speak much on the way. The Godswood is at the heart of Winterfell, and they walk there through the stone corridors while the castle wakes around them. A servant scurries past with a load of firewood. A guard nods without speaking. The door of the great hall stands open, and through it come the sounds of morning in the kitchen, fire and clatter and voices, ordinary sounds. Ned walks and keeps his face arranged, and thinks about what he is about to ask Robert to carry. The Godswood is silent when they enter it. The ancient weirwood stands at the centre, vast and pale, its carved face looking out over the dark pool at its base. The red canopy of leaves overhead has largely fallen, and what remains trembles in the slow autumn air, letting the grey light through in pieces. The smell is of cold earth and still water, and something older than either. Robert stops when he sees the carved face, and for a moment he is quiet, the way men sometimes go quiet in the godswood, who would tell you it is not their place to be quiet. Ned takes the letters from inside his coat, 2 of them, both folded, and he holds them for a moment. "Read the second one first," he says. Robert takes them. He looks at Ned, a question starting. Then he reads something in Ned's face, and the question goes away. He unfolds the second letter and reads, "The godswood waits." Somewhere in the upper canopy, a bird calls once and is quiet. The pool's dark surface holds the pale reflection of the weirwood's trunk, the face looking up at them from below the water, as if there are 2 trees and they are standing between them. Ned watches Robert read. He knows Robert's rages well enough, has seen them at tournaments and in battle, and in the long, small daily frustrations of a man who finds most of the world insufficient. They are enormous and fast, and they burn themselves down quickly. That is not what comes to Robert's face now. What comes now is slower and quieter, and, in some ways, more difficult to watch. His jaw is set. His blue eyes move over the lines with the careful, focused attention of a man checking each word against something he has already been told, finding each one true in ways he would rather it were not. He goes back to the beginning and reads it again. When he finishes, he reads it a 3rd time. Then he sets the letter down on the flat stone beside the pool, very deliberately, with the deliberateness of a man who is being careful with himself. He looks at the weirwood's face for a long moment. The red sap runs from those carved eyes down into the pool below in 2 thin lines, and the pool receives it without comment. The silence holds. "The children," Robert says. Not a question. There is no uncertainty in it, no refusal. It is the sound of a man who has been carrying a thing he did not know he was carrying, and now he has been shown its name, and its name is exactly as bad as the worst thing he knows. "Yes," Ned says quietly. Robert does not move. He stands by the pool with the letter on the stone beside him and his hands at his sides, and his face is doing something Ned has seen perhaps twice in all the years he has known this man. The look of Robert when he has nothing left to perform, when there is no court, no hall, no kingdom watching him, and the king falls away, and the man underneath him is simply standing in a godswood, trying to understand what has been put in his hands. "You believe it," Robert says at last. "Yes." Pycelle. He says the name the way a man tastes something unpleasant. I never trusted him, never liked the look of him. "He risked his life to send that letter," Ned says. "What reason would a Lannister informant have to lie against his own masters?" "To save himself," Robert's voice is flat. "Men like Pycelle read the winds and shift. He could have let Jon Arryn die," Ned says. "Jon was nearly gone. Quietly, in his sleep, and the attending Maester would have grieved, and the world would have moved on, and no one would ever have known. Pycelle chose not to do that. He let Jon live, and then he wrote to me. That is not the act of a man looking for an escape." Robert is quiet. He looks at the letter on the stone. The logic sits between them in the cold air, doing its slow work. After a while, Robert says, "Stannis." Ned waits. "He resigned his seat and went to Dragonstone months ago," Robert says. Without explaining himself, without asking leave, without so much as a word to me beyond the formal letter of resignation. I was angry about it for a week, and then I stopped thinking about it, because Stannis has always been capable of disappearing without explanation when something displeases him. He stops. He looks at the pale bark of the weirwood. He left because of this. He may have known before Jon did, Ned says. He may have been the one who brought the suspicion to Jon, or Jon may have brought it to him. But when Jon fell ill, Stannis understood what Jon falling ill meant, and he left. My brother knew. Something moves through Robert's voice. He knew, and he went to Dragonstone, and he did not tell me. He may not have known how, Ned says. Stannis has never had trouble saying difficult things, Robert says. He has no gift for the easy ones, but the difficult ones he handles without flinching. He simply decided that Dragonstone was safer than my face when I heard it. He is quiet for a moment. He was probably right. The weirwood looks down at them both. Its carved mouth does not open or close. The red sap runs. Robert picks up the letter. He looks at it one more time, then folds it and puts it inside his coat. I will ride south, he says. I will go back to King's Landing, and I will stand in front of Pycelle, and I will hear it from his mouth. And when Jon Arryn is well enough to speak, I will hear it from Jon. And then he stops. Something passes through his face that is not quite a tremor, but is the first real understanding of what doing what needs to be done is actually going to cost. And then I will do what needs to be done. He stands there for a moment, looking at the pool. Bring me a drink, he says. Something strong. Ned looks at him. Not yet, Ned says. Robert turns and looks at him. A long moment. His blue eyes, which are usually the eyes of a man always about to be in motion, are very still. Then something shifts in his face. It is not quite a smile. It is something just behind a smile, the shape of it without the warmth. No, Robert says. Not yet. He turns and walks back toward the keep. Ned walks beside him. The godswood closes behind them, and the weirwood's face watches them go the way it watches everything, without judgment, without hurry, without end. The order to ride south comes over breakfast, delivered by Robert in his flat, practical voice, the one that has no room in it for debate. Jon Arryn is alive and recovering, and the king is needed in the capital. Those are the reasons, and Robert delivers them and does not leave space for questions. Around the table, the party absorbs this. Renly's eyebrows go up briefly, the only sign that anyone finds it worth noting. The knights shift in their seats. Cersei watches Robert's face from across the table. He does not look at her once. The column forms in Winterfell's outer yard, under a sky the colour of old pewter, horses blowing in the cold, and the servants loading the last of the wagons. Catelyn stands at the gate with Robb at her side, watching Ned prepare his horse. Ned looks at her for a long moment before he mounts, and between them passes the kind of wordless conversation that long marriages develop. The language of looks and posture and slight tilts of the head, and what it says this morning is neither simple nor entirely translatable. Robb is 15 and already nearly his father's height, and he watches the departure with grey eyes that take in everything and say nothing, and Ned gives him one brief nod before turning his horse south. The column moves out through the gates, and the King's Road takes them. Robert rides at the head of it with Ned at his right hand, and they do not speak. Not about the godswood, not about the letters, not about any of it. The open road is not the place for that, with the column stretching back for half a mile, and sounds carrying further than anyone who has never lived in the field believes they do. They ride south. The King's Road unspools ahead of them through the brown moorland, grey-white against the autumn grass, and Robert rides into it like a man pushing against something he cannot see. He is holding himself very still inside. Ned can feel it from 6 feet away, the way you can feel a banked fire. Not its heat exactly, but the knowledge that it is there, and contained, and waiting, and has not decided yet whether it is going to stay that way. They do not speak. Behind them in the column, Cersei rides at 20 feet from everyone and everything, her golden hair tucked under a hood, and her green eyes doing their slow, steady work on the party ahead. Jaime rides near her, in his armor, the white Kingsguard cloak pulling in the wind. They have been lovers a long time, these two, long enough that the language between them has lost its need for words entirely. He does not look at her, and she does not look at him, and in that deliberate absence, they say more to each other than most married couples manage in a week. She is watching Robert. Jaime watches her watch him. He reads the set of her jaw and the way her eyes move from Robert to Ned, to the space between them, and he understands. Whatever happened at Winterfell, it has already been put in motion, and the time they thought they had is shorter now than it was. He glances at her once, and she doesn't look back. And that is enough. Further back in the column, Renly Baratheon rides with the relaxed ease of a young lord who has nothing to worry about, which is its own kind of information. He is 21 and handsome in the way his brother Robert was once handsome, before the throne finished with him. Dark-haired, blue-eyed, with a grace of manner that makes everything he does look unconsidered, when in fact very little is. He has been watching Robert since the departure from Winterfell, noting the quality of the silence, the difference between a king at rest and a king with something sitting on him. He comes up alongside Ned in the middle of the second day, where the road opens up and the wind comes through. The king has been quiet since Winterfell, Renly says pleasantly. He is tired from the journey, Ned says. He drank less last night than I have ever seen him drink at a camp. Renly keeps his tone easy. I have been watching Robert drink since I was old enough to notice anything. That was not tiredness. I am not sure what you are looking for me to say to that, Lord Renly. Renly rides beside him for a moment, studying Ned Stark with blue eyes that have always been younger than the mind behind them. Nothing, Renly says pleasantly. I was only looking. He smiles and lets his horse fall back into the column. On the third day south, on a stretch of King's Road, cutting through grey flat country, between two long ridges of rock, the column crests a long rise and finds another party coming north. Small, 4 riders and 2 servants, and at the head of it, a figure distinctive at any distance. Tyrion Lannister is 25 years old and has been riding south from Castle Black for weeks, finishing the wall visit he had undertaken to satisfy what he would describe as mild curiosity, and most people would recognize as the particular restlessness of a man with too much mind and not enough room to put it. He waves his small party off the road to let the royal column pass, and watches it come. Robert passes without warmth, which is his usual manner toward his wife's brother, or perhaps 1 degree beyond his usual manner. Cersei passes, and Tyrion looks at her, and she looks at him, and whatever acknowledgement passes between them is composed and brief, and entirely unlike her usual composure, which is merely cold. This composure is something else. This is the kind Cersei puts on when she needs it, rather than when she wants it. Then Jaime passes. Tyrion watches for his brother's eyes, the way he has watched for them his entire life, the way a man watches for a particular light in a window on a road he travels too often. Jaime's eyes find the horizon and stay there. He does not look at Tyrion at all. That is the thing that does not fit. Tyrion files it away, alongside Cersei's careful face and Robert's unusual silence, and he signals his small party to fall in at the edge of the column. By midday, He has found his way up to Ned Stark, who is the only person in the column whose face is doing nothing complicated. "Lord Stark," he says. "Lord Tyrion." Ned rides without looking at him, which Tyrion finds refreshing. Most people who look away from him do it with more effort. We ride with some urgency, by the look of things. The king is needed in King's Landing. Tyrion is quiet for a moment. He looks at Robert's back at the head of the column, rigid and purposeful, in a way the king's back is not usually rigid or purposeful. He looks at Cersei behind them, not looking at anything in particular. He thinks about Jaime, and what Jaime did not do. "So I see," he says. He asks nothing else. He falls into an easy pace alongside Ned for the better part of an hour, and Ned offers him nothing further, and Tyrion asks for nothing further, and they ride through the grey afternoon in the particular quiet of two people who understand that a silence can be a kind of answer. That night Robert sits at the fire with his cup, and he drinks from it with a care that is unusual for him, deliberate, measured, one swallow at a time. The way a man drinks when he has made a decision about himself and is testing whether the decision will hold. Ned sits across the fire from him. The column settles around them, horses, fire, the sounds of men making camp, and the two of them sit in the middle of it, the way they have sat in the middle of difficult things before, going back further than either of them could easily name. They do not talk about what waits for them in King's Landing. They do not need to. Robert drinks his one careful cup, and Ned watches the fire, and the road south waits for morning. King's Landing rises at the end of the King's Road the way it always does, too large and too loud and too confident in its own significance, the thousand smokes of the city climbing from both banks of the Blackwater Rush and the towers of the Red Keep, visible well before the walls come into view. The crowned stag banners of House Baratheon fly from every gate and rampart. The city does not know why its king has returned from his northern progress ahead of schedule, and the city, as it always does not much care. There is always something happening on every street in King's Landing, and a king returning early is only the current something. They pass through the gates and ride for the Red Keep. Robert does not stop. He does not acknowledge the crowds or the gate wardens or the officials waiting to receive him in the outer yard. He rides through King's Landing with the enclosed, purposeful silence of a man going somewhere specific, and the column follows him up Aegon's high hill to the Red Keep, and the Red Keep's gates open before him. Ned stays close. Barristan Selmy rides a half-length behind, tall and silver-haired and composed, the finest knight of his generation, still carrying himself like one even at 61, his back straight and his face giving nothing. Robert doesn't go to the throne room. He doesn't go to his chambers. He walks through the Red Keep's corridors with the directness of a man who has been making this walk in his mind for 2 weeks, and he goes to the Grand Maester's chambers, and he does not knock. The door is already open. Pycelle is standing. This is the first thing Ned notices. And it is notable, because Pycelle does not stand like this. Pycelle is 81 years old, and has worn a particular posture for as long as Ned has known him, the hunched and trembling weight of a very old man for whom each movement is an effort and each breath a negotiation. He has always moved like something that might collapse, and Ned has always assumed it was simply the truth of a man his age. But the man standing in the center of his own chambers is upright. He is still old, still white-haired, still wearing the chain of his office. Only the performance has been set aside, and what is left underneath it is a man who has been waiting for this conversation and has prepared himself to have it. He looks at Robert. He looks at Ned. He looks at Barristan Selmy standing at the door, and he nods slightly. "Your Grace," he says. Robert walks into the room and stands opposite him and says nothing for a moment. He is looking at the old man the way he looked at the letter in the God's Wood, with that same focused, inward attention. Then, "Tell me," Pycelle tells him. He begins at the beginning, because the kind of accounting he has to give only means anything if it starts where it starts. Jon Arryn fell ill. The attending Maester was summoned immediately, a careful and thorough man, and he identified the work of a slow-acting poison and began administering the purge treatment, the course of herb drafts that, given enough time and given the body enough cooperation, might draw the poison out of a man's blood before it finished what it had started. The poison was the tears of Lys, from the free city of Lys, colourless and tasteless, and so subtle in its progress that it could be days before anyone knew to look for it. Jon Arryn had swallowed enough of it to kill a younger man, and the attending Maester gave him what chance remained. Cersei came to Pycelle the evening after Jon fell ill. She did not threaten him, Pycelle says. She never threatened him. She had never needed to. She told him what was needed in the quiet, reasonable voice she uses when she is telling someone what to do without framing it as an order. And what was needed was this: dismiss the attending Maester, administer milk of the poppy for the pain, ease the hand's passage. A small thing. The latest in a long sequence of small things. He had been in the Lannisters' service since 283 AC, since the morning Tywin Lannister's army came to the gates of King's Landing during the sack, and Pycelle had gone to the Mad King Aerys and advised him, with all his skill and care, to open those gates. He had done it because he had believed the Targaryens were finished, and the Lannisters were the future, and he had turned out to be right about that. And for 15 years after, he had done what was asked of him, in the small ways that a grand Maester can do things. A favourable omission here. A report sent south to Casterly Rock there. Silence on matters that the Lannisters wished kept silent. He had never thought of it as treachery. He had thought of it as the necessary navigation of a man who intends to survive. He went to the attending Maester to dismiss him. He stood in the doorway of Jon Arryn's chamber, with the dismissal already formed, and Jon Arryn's lips were moving, the phrase the hand had been reaching for across days of fever, the thing he had found just before the poison took him and had been trying to hold on to ever since. The seed is strong. Pycelle knew what it meant. He had known for some time before Jon fell ill, since he had seen what the old hand was reading and had understood the direction of the inquiry, the lineages and histories of the great houses of the Seven Kingdoms, the passages on Baratheon inheritance, the quiet visits Jon had made to the Street of Steel and to the other parts of the city, where Robert Baratheon's black-haired bastard children could be found, each of them carrying the mark of his house in their faces. He had known. He had stood in the doorway prepared to let that knowledge die with Jon Arryn. He did not. He called the attending Maester back to his work. He returned to his chambers, and he wrote the Raven to Lord Stark at Winterfell, and he sent it before dawn. What he does not know, he says, and says honestly, is who administered the tears of Lys to Jon Arryn. He had a suspicion, for a time, that it was Jon Arryn's former squire, a newly knighted young man who had been close to the hand in his final weeks. He had used that suspicion when he spoke to Ned Stark in the castle, as deflection, as the kind of half-formed doubt that keeps a man from looking at the harder answer. The harder answer has its own logic, and he does not know it for certain, but he has thought about it, and he believes he knows the shape of it, and he does not say it aloud because it is not a thing he knows. When he finishes, the room is very still. Robert has not moved. He is standing where he was standing when Pycelle began, and he has not sat down, and he has not interrupted, and he has not looked at anything in the room except the old man's face. His own face is the face Ned has seen twice now, the face Robert wears when he has nothing left to perform, when there is no court, no hall, no audience left to manage, and the man underneath the king is simply standing somewhere, holding the shape of what he has been given. "My children," Robert says. It comes out very quiet. Not a question, not quite an accusation, just the fact of them, and the fact of what they are, and the weight of 14 years behind it. Pycelle bows his head. "Where is Jon Arryn?" Ned asks. Pycelle looks up. "Still in his chambers, my king. He has been there since I sent for more of the treatment. He lives. The poison did not kill him." He pauses for a moment, and when he speaks again, his voice is level and old, and carrying the specific weight of a man who has decided that the only kind of honesty left to him is complete. Ask him yourself. He will tell you what I have told you, and more. Robert stands and looks at Pycelle for a while longer. His hands remain at his sides. He does not raise them. Then he turns. He walks to the door, and he stops there, with his hand on the frame and his back to the room. And he says without turning, "Barristan, see to it that the Grand Maester does not leave these chambers until I say so. Sir Barristan Selmy has served 4 kings. He has never disobeyed a direct command from his sovereign, and he does not begin now. As you command, your grace," he says. Robert goes out. Ned follows. The door does not close fully behind them, and through the gap that remains, the Grand Maester and the Lord Commander of the King's Guard stand in the quiet of the chamber, 2 old men on opposite sides of a long reckoning, and wait. The attending Maester is at work when Robert arrives at Jon Arryn's chambers, and he looks up from the small table where he keeps his preparations with the expression of a man who has been expecting this visit and does not know whether to feel relieved by it. "The hand is awake," he says quietly. He has been awake most of the morning. He can speak, but the effort costs him, and the Tears of Lies did its damage before the purge treatment was able to slow it, and what remains is a man who is alive because of a decision made in the dark before dawn, and who will not be anything like himself for a long time yet, if he becomes anything like himself again at all. Robert nods. He tells the attending Maester to leave them. He sits in the chair beside the bed. Jon Arryn looks very old. He has always looked old, in the way that some men do from the very beginning. He looked old when Robert and Ned were boys at the Eyrie, a man who had already been through whatever was going to make him who he was by the time the 2 of them arrived, patient and weathered and unflappable in the way of someone who has long since settled his account with the world. He does not look like that now. The Tears of Lys has taken something from him that the years had not managed to take, and what is in the bed is a careful, fragile thing, parchment pale and breathing in the shallow way of someone who has learned not to ask too much of himself. The room smells of the attending Maester's herbs, something bitter and medicinal, and the fire burns low in the grate, and the light through the narrow window is the grey of a winter morning in King's Landing, cold and without warmth. Robert sits with him. He is a large man, broad and thick, and he sits in the chair the way he sat in chairs at the Eyrie when he was 15 and did not know what to do with his hands, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, his weight present, not performing anything. The king falls away in this room. There is no court, no hall, no throne. No need to fill the air with something larger than the truth. There is only a man in a chair and an old man in a bed, and the particular weight of how long one has known the other, and what has been done to him. Jon's eyes open. They are clouded still, filmed with the long work of the poison and the purge treatment and the weeks of fever. But they are open. They find Robert's face and stay there. And Jon looks at him the way a man looks when he needs to be sure his message has been received. His lips move. "The seed is strong," Jon says. His voice is thin and worn, but the words are clear, shaped with the particular effort of a man who has been preserving them. "I know," Robert says, quietly. Just that. Jon studies his face for another moment, making certain, and then his eyes close, and the breath that comes out of him is long and slow, and the next one that comes in is more even. Robert watches him breathe. After a while, without opening his eyes, Jon says, "Stannis." "I know about Stannis," Robert says. "He went to Dragonstone. He came to me first." Jon is slow and measured, spending words carefully. "I thought I had found it myself, but he had been looking longer. He came to me when he was sure. We looked at it together." A pause. A breath. "When I fell ill, I told him to go, that it was not safe to stay and wait to see which way it fell. He could have told me himself," Robert says. "He was afraid of your face when you heard it," Jon says. Robert is quiet for a moment. "He was right to be," he says finally. They sit in the quiet. The herbs burn in their small clay pot. Somewhere outside the window, King's Landing goes on at its usual volume, indifferent to what is happening in the chambers of a man it has almost forgotten since he fell ill. Jon falls asleep between one breath and the next. Robert sits with him for a few minutes more, and the room holds the particular silence of a man sitting with something he cannot change, and at last he rises from the chair with the careful deliberateness of someone trying not to disturb the room's quality, and he goes out. He and Ned walk the corridors of the Red Keep. Robert walks fast and says nothing for a long stretch, his hands at his sides and his jaw set, and Ned walks beside him and lets the silence do what it needs to do. Then Robert says, his voice quiet and entirely decided, "I want Cersei arrested. Tonight. And Jaime." "Not yet," Ned says. Robert stops walking. He turns and looks at Ned with blue eyes that have very little patience in them at this moment, the eyes of a man who has been patient for 2 weeks on a road that cost him everything he thought he knew about his life, and who has now heard the truth confirmed by the mouth of the man he trusts above all others in the world, and who does not see why there should be any further waiting. "I am the king," Robert says. "They committed treason. What else is there to consider?" "Tywin Lannister," Ned says. Robert looks at him. "He is at Casterly Rock," Ned says. "He has been there all this while, and he is the most powerful lord in Westeros, and House Lannister's gold mines made them the richest house in the realm before any of the rest of it happened. He has not marched. He has not threatened. He has sent a letter asking for terms, which means he is calculating, and Tywin Lannister calculating is the most dangerous version of him there is." He pauses. "If you arrest Cersei and Jaime tonight, Robert, without the council's formal establishment of the truth, without Stannis here to corroborate what Pycelle and Jon have said, Tywin will call it a madman's grievance. He will say the king is acting on the word of an old maester and a man half dead from poison, that it is grief and paranoia and not evidence. And there are lords in the Westerlands who will believe him, and there are lords who will not believe him, but who will follow him because he is Tywin Lannister, and he has never lost." Robert stares at the corridor wall. "And if he marches," Ned says, "it is not only Cersei and Jaime who suffer. It is every man who fights for the crown against a Lannister army. It is the Riverlands and the Reach and every family who sends its sons into a war that could have been avoided. Stannis is at Dragonstone with the same truth in his possession. His testimony before the small council, with Pycelle's confession and Jon's own account, is unimpeachable. No lord in the realm calls that madness. No lord follows Tywin on those grounds. Robert is quiet for a long time. He looks at the wall and something moves through his face that is the shape of a man containing a very large thing in a very small space. "You are asking me to wait longer," he says. "I am asking you to win," Ned says. Robert breathes. He turns and looks at Ned, and the blue eyes are still not patient, but they are thinking now rather than only feeling. "Send for Stannis," he says at last. "Convene the council when he arrives." And then he stops. Then it gets done. Then it gets done, Ned says, correctly and completely, and in a way that no one can undo. They go to the rookery together. Ned writes the summons in his own hand, because his hand is steady and Robert's is not, and addresses it to Stannis Baratheon, Lord of Dragonstone, and writes that the king requires his presence in King's Landing with all haste, and that the matter concerns what Stannis already knows. Robert presses his seal into the wax himself. He holds the wax down with the heel of his hand, and says nothing. The Raven goes at dusk, lifting from the rookery window and climbing east over the rooftops of the city toward the open water, carrying the king's seal and Ned Stark's words toward an island where a man has been waiting, in his way, for something like this to begin. The Raven reaches Dragonstone on the 4th morning, crossing the open water of Blackwater Bay through the kind of grey fog that sits in the mouth of the bay in late autumn and does not lift regardless of what the wind does. Stannis Baratheon is in the chamber of the painted table when the Maester brings it to him. He is where he almost always is when he is at Dragonstone, standing over the great carved map of Westeros, reading the old stone the way a man reads something he has already memorized and keeps returning to anyway, because the memorizing was never the point. The table was here when he arrived. It was here before Robert won the throne, and before the rebellion, and before any of the things that made the rebellion necessary. It will probably outlast all of them. Stannis has always found this simultaneously comforting and grim, which is perhaps the most accurate description of Stannis himself that he would ever accept. He takes the letter. He reads it twice. The seal is Robert's. The hand is Robert's. The jagged, impatient letters of a man who was never taught to enjoy writing and never learned on his own. But the substance is Ned Stark's. That much is clear within the first 2 sentences, from the precision of the phrasing, the careful enumeration of evidence, the way every claim is attached to a source. Ned Stark writes the way he does everything else, methodically, without flourish, with the patient assumption that facts will carry their own weight. The facts, in this case, carry a great deal of weight. Stannis sets the letter on the painted table and stands for a long moment, looking at the carved stone of King's Landing, the harbour mouth, the Blackwater rush cutting down from the hills. He has known for 3 years. Not all of it. He did not have sources inside the Red Keep, did not have Jon Arryn's patience or his access. But enough. He put what he knew in a letter to Jon Arryn, because it needed to be somewhere outside his own head, where he had been carrying it like a stone in a pocket, and he sent it. And Jon Arryn did not write back, and Stannis concluded that either the letter had not arrived, or the man had chosen silence over action. There are many things Stannis has spent years accepting he can do nothing about. He added this to the list and kept going. This letter tells him the list has one fewer item on it. He calls for the Maester. He gives his instructions in the flat, efficient voice he uses for all instructions, the voice that every man who has served under him describes as the voice of a man for whom deliberation has already happened somewhere else. And this is simply the communication of its result. He tells the Maester what ship to prepare. He tells him the destination. "What shall I write in reply?" the Maester asks. "A blank page under my seal," Stannis says. The Maester does not ask him to explain this. He has served at Dragonstone long enough to understand that when Stannis says blank page, he means his presence will be the reply, and that anything written would be redundant, which Stannis finds almost physically objectionable. He goes to find Davos. In King's Landing the weather has turned cold. It comes off the Blackwater in the evenings now, finding the gaps between the buildings, making the torch flames lean in their brackets. The city smells of salt and smoke, and the particular rot of a city of 500,000 people living close together, all of them burning things and cooking things and disposing of things in the narrow channels between the buildings. It smells like it always smells. It smells like everything, all of it at once, overwhelming and continuous and indifferent. Cersei Lannister sits in her solar and listens. She was her father's student in this above most things, the lesson that the silences between what people say carry as much information as the words, and often more, because what people choose not to say is a choice, and choices reveal. She has spent 20 years in this city, listening to the silences. She knows what they mean when the servants go quiet in a particular way. She knows what they mean when Robert's personal guard changes its arrangement without any announcement. She knows what it means when the Grand Master misses a small council meeting, and the explanation offered is illness, and the illness cannot be seen. Something is wrong. She cannot find the source of it, which is unusual. She is not a woman who fails at this kind of accounting. Robert has not come to her chambers in 5 days. This is not itself unusual. Their marriage has been a matter of separate chambers for years, a mutual arrangement that neither of them acknowledged formally, and both understood completely. But 5 days ago something changed in the quality of his absence, a thing she has never encountered before in the particular texture of the distance between them. It is not hostility. It is not the weary contempt she has learned to navigate. It is the silence of a man who has decided something and is keeping it close, and she has seen this silence in other men, in her father primarily, and in Jaime at certain moments, but never in Robert. Robert's decisions are not the kept close kind. Robert's decisions are announced at volume, or not made at all. She pours wine and does not drink it. She watches the candle burn down another notch. Ned Stark has been given the Tower of the Hand. She expected him to refuse. He is the kind of man who refuses things as a reflex, who has made the accumulation of refusals into a practice, as if each one keeps his honor a little more intact. He accepted instead, and has been working in the Tower of the Hand with a quiet efficiency that is more alarming to her than refusal would have been. She thinks about her children, Joffrey across the keep, 12 years old, and so certain of the shape of the world. Myrcella awake late with a book, the thing Cersei is most afraid to look at too long, because it makes too visible how much there is to lose. Tommen, 3 years old, and knowing nothing of anything, which is the best thing about being 3. She stands. She sends for Jaime. The Tower of the Hand is lit late into the night. Ned Stark has been at Jon Arryn's papers for 3 days, and has gotten through a significant portion of them, which tells him several things at once, about how thorough Jon Arryn was, and about how thorough the evidence is, and about how long this has been building without anyone willing to act on it. He reads carefully. He makes notes in the margins of a blank page. He tries to understand what a man sees when he is looking at the same facts and choosing not to pursue them, and he finds he cannot quite manage this imagination, because it requires a kind of deliberate not-looking that he has never learned. He is still at the desk when Barristan Selmy comes in and closes the door behind him. Barristan in the candlelight is an old man, which Ned knows intellectually, but which the daylight usually softens somehow, the way daylight softens many things. He is the greatest knight in living memory, and he is old, and the two facts exist in him together without resolving each other, which is perhaps what makes him remarkable. He stands near the door. The ship from Dragonstone. 2 days, weather permitting. 2 days, Ned says. Stannis will want to be present. Barristan looks at the candle on the desk rather than at Ned. He sent the same information to Jon Arryn 3 years ago. Ned sets down the quill. Jon didn't pursue it then, Barristan says. He told me once, in a different context, that you cannot pursue the truth of a thing without being certain the truth will produce a better outcome than the not knowing. He believed there were circumstances in which it would not. A pause. I think he changed his mind when someone tried to kill him, Ned says. Yes. Barristan's face does not move. When someone tried to kill him. They are quiet for a moment. The city sounds drift up from below. The ordinary night sounds of a living city going about its evening business without knowledge of or interest in what is happening in the Tower of the Hand. The children, Ned says. The children are innocent. Barristan's voice goes flat on this, flat in the way of a man who has arrived at a position through difficulty and is not inviting it to be reopened. Whatever is decided has to account for that. Robert knows it. Yes. Barristan moves toward the door. Get some sleep, my lord. Tomorrow will be a long day, and the day after longer still. He goes. Ned looks at the papers spread across the desk. He looks at the dark window, the city below it, the harbour where somewhere a ship is being readied for morning. Then he picks up the quill and goes back to work, and the candle burns down, and the city goes about its night, and somewhere across the water, a man is preparing to sail with the patience of someone who has been waiting a long time for exactly this. Stannis Baratheon arrives on the morning of the 3rd day after the Raven, his ship threading the mouth of the Blackwater Rush before the city has fully woken, the fog still sitting heavy in the harbour, the crowned stag banners of his household hanging stiff in the cold air off the water. He has brought 3 ships. He does not need more than 3 ships for this particular purpose, and Stannis has never brought more of anything than the thing requires. Robert is at the dock. This becomes a thing talked about in the lower city before midday. The king standing at the waterfront in his riding clothes, no ceremony arranged, no herald sent ahead, just Robert Baratheon and Ned Stark and 4 Kingsguard at their backs, watching a ship come in off the Blackwater. People gather at a distance the way people gather when a king does something unannounced, the instinct of a city that has learned to pay close attention when its rulers behave unexpectedly. Stannis descends the gangplank with Davos Seaworth a step behind. He walks to where Robert is standing, and the 2 brothers look at each other. They have never been easy with each other. There may have been a time when they were very young, and the differences between them had not yet become fixed and visible, but Stannis cannot locate that time in his memory, and Robert has never spoken of it. By the time either of them was old enough to understand what ease between 2 people meant, they were already too unlike for it to be natural, and everything since has confirmed the difference rather than worn it down. But underneath the difference there is something older and plainer, the simple fact of having come from the same place, of having been the same two boys in the same tall castle above the same storm-grey sea. Robert holds out his hand. Stannis takes it. "You got my message," Robert says. "I got your message," Stannis says. "And you received mine 3 years ago." 3 years ago, Robert says. There is nothing else to say on the dock, in front of the harbour men and the watching crowd, and the whole indifferent life of the waterfront, going about its mourning. There is a great deal to say, and it belongs somewhere else. Ned Stark exchanges a nod with Stannis. Davos Seaworth catches Ned's eye over Stannis's shoulder and gives him the look of a man who has spent 3 days on a ship, keeping a very contained man from expanding beyond his container, and is relieved to have reached the shore. They go up through the city together, through the gate and up the long hill to the Red Keep, the morning crowds parting around the Kingsguard without being asked. The city watches them pass. The city does not yet know what it is watching. The meeting is in Jon Arryn's chambers, at Jon Arryn's insistence. He could have been carried to the Tower of the Hand, or to Robert's Solar, or to any of the rooms in the Red Keep that carry more political weight to them. He chose his own chambers, and the choice says something about him, about the particular shape of his authority, and where he has always believed that authority properly comes from. Not the room, not the title, the man who does the work. He is sitting up when they arrive, which is more than he could manage a fortnight past. He begins to rise when Stannis enters, and Stannis crosses the room in 3 strides and puts a hand on his arm and tells him to stay seated. Jon Arryn looks at Stannis for a long moment. Then at Robert, who has come in behind and is standing near the window with his arms folded and his jaw set in the way of a man who has been holding something in for a long time and intends to hold it a while longer. Then at Ned, who has taken a position near the door in the way of a man who understands that some of what is about to happen belongs to other people and is making space for it. "You look better than I expected," Stannis says. "I look terrible," Jon says. His voice is steady, which costs him something. But steadiness has always cost him something, and he has always paid it. "But I feel somewhat better, which is not the same thing." He pauses. "There is a thing I need to say before anything else." He looks at Stannis, then at Robert. They wait. 3 years ago I received a letter from Dragonstone. I chose not to pursue the matter it raised. He does not rush through this. "That was a mistake. I made it for reasons I believed were sound, and I will not insult either of you by pretending otherwise. But they were wrong reasons applied to a situation I had misread. I want that said before we begin." Neither Robert nor Stannis speaks. What passes between them is not absolution. It is the acknowledgement that they are all in this room with the thing still here, and that they are going to deal with it. "The children," Jon says. "Start there," Robert says. Jon Arryn takes them through it the way he approaches every problem of governance, methodically and in sequence, without ornamentation. Evidence first, then source, then implication, then conclusion. He names the men he spoke with over the course of his inquiry, the stable hands, and the smith and others closer to court. He describes the physical evidence that has accumulated across 12 years and 3 children, the particular set of features that have come down through every Baratheon for generations, the black hair, the strong jaw, the bone structure that prints itself reliably on every true-born child of the line, going back to Orys Baratheon himself, and the daughter of the last Storm King he took to wife. Not one of those features is present in the Queen's children. In 3 children, over 12 years, not one mark of the man she married. The room is very quiet when he finishes. "Pycelle," Robert says. "Pycelle knew and chose silence under pressure." Jon Arryn holds his gaze. He also chose, when the silence would have cost a man his life, to act against it. That is the full account of what he did. Robert absorbs this. His jaw works. Tywin, he says. Some will argue that Tywin Lannister does not necessarily know what his children do in private. I know what Tywin knows, and what he permits himself not to know. Robert's voice has gone very quiet, the quietness of something long compressed. I sat across a table from that man for 15 years. I watched him manage what he knew and what he did not know, the way you manage a weapon. He stops. He knew. No one in the room argues with this. Ned speaks, carefully. There are the children. I know there are children. Robert looks at the window. Stannis' ships are visible in the harbour from here, grey shapes on grey water, solid and present. Joffrey, Pycelle, Tommen. He stops on the last name. His face does something small and difficult that no one acknowledges. 3 years old. The children are innocent, Jon says. Whatever is decided has to rest on that. Yes. Robert turns back from the window. His face has settled into something that is not peace, but has moved past the worst of the turmoil. The look of a man who has arrived at a decision he does not like and has finished arriving at it. I need to know what you recommend. Jon Arryn recommends, as he has always recommended things, in order of necessity. The succession established before any other action is taken. The evidence documented formally under seal. Movement before word can reach Casterly Rock. He does not recommend cruelty. He does not recommend theatre. He recommends the minimum force applied to the maximum necessary result, which has been his administrative philosophy through 16 years of keeping this particular kingdom from coming apart at its seams. When he finishes, Robert looks at him for a long moment. Then at Stannis, who has stood exactly as he has stood since they entered the room, his face giving nothing, waiting with the patience of a man who learned patience the hard way and didn't learn it from anyone. Send for Cersei, Robert says. Jon Arryn nods. Today, Robert says. This morning. The window holds the harbour and the cold grey water below it, the 3 ships at their moorings with their banners hanging still, and the city beyond them, going about its ordinary business without knowledge of or interest in what is being decided above it, which is perhaps the most constant thing about any city, in any kingdom, in any age. The way it simply continues. No one tells Cersei where she is going. The guard comes to her solar with the message. The king wishes to see her in the Tower of the Hand, and she reads it twice, and folds it, and hands it back and calls for her handmaids. She takes care with her appearance. More care than the mourning warrants, more than a simple audience requires, because she was her father's daughter before she was Robert's wife, and Tywin Lannister taught her early that how you present yourself in difficult circumstances is itself a decision with consequences. She puts on the crimson gown that is the right shade. She wears the necklace Robert gave her in the 2nd year of their marriage, when he was still occasionally making an effort to remember that he was married to a person. She walks to the Tower of the Hand without hurrying. Her back is straight. Her face is still. She knows before she enters. She knows from the guards outside the door, their faces carefully arranged to show nothing, the blankness of men who have been briefed and told to give nothing away. She knows from the particular weight of the morning, which has been strange since she woke, carrying the feeling of something already decided. She knows the way her father taught her to know things, not from evidence added piece by piece, but from pattern, from the shape of what is absent. She opens the door. Robert, standing to the right of the desk, near the window. Stannis, standing to the left, which means he came from Dragonstone, which means Robert sent for him before any of this, which means this has been building for longer than she estimated. Ned Stark at the desk. Jon Arryn in a chair by the fire, grey-faced, alive. She takes it in with one sweep of her eyes and understands exactly what she is looking at, all of it in the time it takes to cross the threshold. Her face gives nothing. "Cersei," Robert says. "Robert." She moves to the chair across the desk from Ned Stark and sits without being invited to sit, because sitting is the decision she has made about what kind of room this is going to be. She is still making decisions in this room. It is the only thing she has left that is entirely hers. "Lord Arryn, you're looking better." She says this to Jon Arryn with something that sounds like pleasantry, because she is genuinely complicated about Jon Arryn in ways she has never fully resolved. He was a decent man in an indecent situation, which is what she would say about most of them, herself included. Jon Arryn looks at her. His expression is difficult to name. It is not contempt, not pity, not the satisfaction of a man who has been proven right. It is something that might be sorrow, which is worse than all three. "We know about the children," Robert says. She looks at him. Her face is still. It is costing her. "We know about Jaime," Ned Stark says, in the quiet, flat voice of a man stating a matter of record. She begins a sentence. She doesn't know what you think you know, and stops because Robert makes a sound, a single short exhale through his nose that cuts the sentence before it can reach its end. She has known this man for 20 years. She knows what that sound means. She has heard it exactly twice before in their marriage, both times immediately preceding something she was unable to stop. "Don't," Robert says. And then, which she did not expect, "Please." The please silences her. Outside the tower windows, the city goes about its morning, the thousand smokes rising, the harbour sounds climbing from below, the ordinary continuous life of 500,000 people who do not know what is happening in this room and do not need to. "Joffrey," Robert says. "Myrcella. Tommen." He says the names the way a man recites something he has read so many times it has become something other than information. He breathes through his nose. They didn't choose any of this. She looks at him. "I'm not going to punish children," he says. "I want you to hear that before anything else. Whatever happens in this room, that is not part of it." A pause. His hands at his sides open and close slowly. "But the crown cannot pass to Joffrey. He is the eldest. He is not my son." The words fall into the room and stay there. Robert's face is terrible and ordinary at the same time. The face of a man who has carried a truth for 10 days and is setting it down and finding that setting it down does not make it lighter. "Cersei, he is not my son, and Jon knows it, and Stannis knows it, and Ned Stark knows it, and there is nothing in this room or any other that changes that." She is looking at him. She is looking for an argument, and finding none that work here. Not with these men. Not with Jon Arryn, alive in that chair. Her father would have had them, the kind that carry the implied weight of Casterly Rock's armies and the Gold Road. But she measures the room and understands that Robert has done what he rarely does, which is prepare, and the preparation has closed the spaces she would normally occupy. "What happens to my children?" she says instead. Ned Stark speaks, and his voice is the voice of a man who means exactly what he says, and has built his entire life on the principle of meaning it. "They will be cared for. They are innocent. Nothing that was done is theirs." She looks at him. He holds the look without any difficulty. The most disorienting thing about Ned Stark in any negotiation is that he cannot be moved by the things that move other men, because those things are principally versions of self-interest, and Ned Stark's self-interest runs so far beneath the surface that by the time you find it, you have already lost. "Joffrey," she says. "Joffrey is 12 years old," Robert says. "He can grow up somewhere that is not a throne room, somewhere away from the capital." He says it simply, the simplicity of things that are both inevitable and painful, and she hears it for what it is. She has no defense against it. Not in this room. "And me," she says. Robert looks at her for a long moment. Something in his face has changed from what she has known across 20 years. The anger is gone, which she expected, but the contempt is gone too, which she did not. And what is there instead is something that might have been grief at some earlier point and has been converted by time into resignation. The resignation of a man who has made peace with what his life became and will not pretend it was otherwise. "Casterly Rock," he says, "under your father's supervision." "Or Kevin's," Stannis says from the left side of the room, in the flat voice he uses for everything, the voice that has never once performed a softening. "Or Kevin's, if Tywin declines," Robert says. The room is quiet. Cersei looks at her hands. The ring Robert gave her at their wedding, old gold, a stag in the setting. She has worn it for 20 years without thinking about it. She is thinking about it now. "Jaime," she says. "Jaime is being attended to," Robert says. She looks up at him. Something rises in her, all of it, the 20 years and the marriage and the children and the things that were done and the things she did and the rooms she learned to rule in a court that belonged to someone else. It rises, and she doesn't let it reach her face, and she doesn't say it, because her father's voice says the room is not won by saying what is true, but by saying what is useful, and there is nothing useful left to say. "I want to see my children," she says. Robert looks at her. Then he nods. She stands. She walks to the door with her back straight and her face still, and does not let it change until she has passed the guards and down 2 flights of stairs and around the corner and out of any possible line of sight, and then she stops against the cold stone of the stairwell and closes her eyes and breathes. The stairwell is dark and cold and smells of torch smoke and old stone, and she stands in it for a moment that has no particular length, and then she straightens and goes to find her children. The Raven to Casterly Rock goes out the same afternoon, written in Ned Stark's hand at Robert's instruction. The message is short and precise. It states what is known. It states what has been decided. It extends a courtesy that the circumstances do not strictly require, a brief acknowledgement of House Lannister's long service to the crown, because Ned inserts it and Robert doesn't remove it when he reads the draft, which means he has decided it costs nothing and may buy something. And in the arithmetic of politics, those are the terms on which courtesies are extended. The message does not ask for Tywin's agreement. It does not ask for anything. The absence of the asking is its own message, and Tywin Lannister, who has never in his life confused courtesy with substance, will read it clearly. The formal announcement is made 3 days after Stannis' arrival, at a small council meeting, attended by the council, and Stannis and Ned Stark and Pycelle, who sits through it with the expression of a man witnessing the conclusion of something he helped prevent from becoming worse. Robert speaks in the flat, practical voice he uses for decisions he has made and does not intend to revisit. The succession is under formal review. Lord Commander Selmy is suspended from small council duties pending review of his testimony. Sir Jaime Lannister is relieved of the white cloak pending full council determination of appropriate charges. The Queen Consort is withdrawing to Casterly Rock while the matter is resolved. The small council absorbs this in silence. The men around this table are experienced enough to understand when debate is and is not an option, and they have the collective intelligence to read the room correctly. Renly Baratheon, who is 18 and has not yet mastered all the places where silence is the better choice, says, "And the children." "The children," Robert says, "are not the council's concern." He says it without heat, but with a finality that closes the question. Renly glances at Stannis. Stannis's expression offers him nothing. Renly decides not to speak again. Stannis stays a week. In that week, he and Robert speak twice at length in Robert's chambers with no one else present, and what is said in those conversations belongs only to them. What the rest of the Red Keep sees is the result. The two brothers moving through the business of the crown with a coordination they have never managed before, Robert giving direction and Stannis implementing it. The chronic gap between a king who finds governance distasteful and a lord who treats it as a moral obligation, suddenly bridged by the accident of crisis and blood. They disagree twice, in corridors, in the precise clipped language of men who have long practice at disagreeing, and each time they resolve it in under an hour and move forward. Ned watches this and thinks about something Jon Arryn told him years ago, that Robert had always needed something to fight against to be himself, that without an enemy he turned inward and against his own life, and that the question had always been what you aimed him at. For 16 years no one had aimed him correctly. It will not last. Forces of nature do not maintain direction. But it is lasting long enough. Tywin's reply arrives on the 6th day. It is 2 sentences. Ned reads it at the writing table, reads it a second time, and goes to find Robert. He says the matter is a family concern and will be handled accordingly, Ned says. He says his daughter will be received at Casterly Rock. Robert reads the letter himself. He turns it over as if expecting something on the back. That is the whole of it. That is the whole of it. Robert sets it on the desk. He goes to the window, which he always does when he is thinking through something, and looks at the harbour below and the black water beyond it, and the distant hills. He is not going to move, he says. This is not a question. He sees the same numbers we see, Ned says. Stannis in the harbour, 3,000 men in the city. He is also calculating something past the numbers. Robert taps the letter without picking it up. Tywin never fights a battle he is not certain of winning. He will find another angle. There will always be another angle with that man. Yes, Ned says. Then we will deal with it when it comes. Robert turns from the window. His face has settled into something that is not peace, but has moved well past the worst of these 10 days. The look of a man who has made a decision he will have to keep remaking, and has decided to keep making it. Not before. Cersei leaves on the 9th morning. She goes without ceremony, by Robert's requirement, which she does not argue with, and the not arguing is its own kind of statement about what is left between them. She takes Joffrey and Myrcella. She comes to Ned the evening before, in the corridor outside his solar, and tells him quietly that she is leaving Tommen. She does not explain it. She says it the way a person says something they have examined from every side and come out the other end of, and are not going to reopen. Ned looks at her. He thinks about asking why and does not. The decision will be honored, he says. She looks at him for a moment with an expression he cannot fully read, and then she turns and goes. He watches her go, and then goes back into his solar and closes the door and sits at the desk and looks at the papers in front of him, and thinks, for a long time, about things that are not the papers. Stannis sails on the morning of the 10th day, tide and wind both going the right direction, which he acknowledges as a practical convenience, and Davos, privately, calls fortunate. Davos comes to find Ned on the dock before they board, which neither of them anticipated, and which both of them, in some way, needed. He will hold the succession firm, Davos says. He means Stannis. He means the documentation that Stannis spent 5 of his 7 days ensuring was properly witnessed and sealed and entered into the records with the specificity that Stannis brings to everything he considers important, which is all of it. I know, Ned says. He is not an easy man to be allied with. No. Ned watches the ship at its mooring, the cold water beyond. But he is an honest one. Davos considers this with the patient expression of a man who has spent years translating Stannis Baratheon to other human beings. Yes, he says, finally. That's true. He extends his hand, the left one, the fingers shortened by Stannis's own blade years ago, in payment for the crime and the debt of the onion ship both. Take care of yourself, my lord. And you, Ned says. The ship sails. The harbour returns to its ordinary morning. Jon Arryn does not recover fully. The attending Maester says this plainly, because he is a man who believes plain speech serves the people he cares for better than comfortable vagueness. The tears of lice did what it did to his blood, and the months of treatment have repaired what they can. He moves carefully now, tires by midday, but he reads and he works, and he sends Ned notes in the margins of reports, in the precise hand of a man who has been administering this kingdom for 16 years and has not yet found a reason to stop. One morning he hands a report back and says, "You are doing well." Ned says, "I don't know what I'm doing." That is exactly what doing well means in this work, Jon says. The men who believe they know are the ones I have spent 16 years cleaning up after. He is quiet for a moment, looking at the harbour through the window. I have been thinking about Littlefinger. Ned waits. The letter Lysa sent your wife. The accusation against the Lannisters. Littlefinger was behind it. I believe that. And I have believed it for some time. His eyes move from the window. I want you to look at the Treasury records carefully, not what he presents to the Council, the accounts underneath. How long has this concerned you? Ned asks. Long enough, Jon says, which is the answer of a man who is not proud of the interval. Ned picks up his quill and makes a note. Robert finds him in the Godswood that evening. The Red Keep's Godswood is smaller than Winterfell's, and younger by centuries, lacking the weight that lives in old stone and older roots. But the weirwood is there with its white bark and red leaves, and the carved face that watches the way weirwood faces always watch, without preference for any particular outcome, without hurry, without end. Robert sits beside Ned on the root and says nothing for a while. He has a cup. It contains water. I have been thinking about Lyanna, he says. Ned looks at the weirwood face. She would have hated all of this, Robert says. The capital, the court. She hated it even as an idea. The idea of being queen, before she was ever in any danger of becoming one. She wanted something else, and she never quite knew what. Only that it wasn't this. He looks at the cup. I know what I became. I am not asking you to disagree with what that says about me. But I did love her, before any of the rest of it. I want you to know I haven't confused myself about that. Ned is quiet. The weirwood watches them both. Go home when this is settled, Robert says. Your children need you, and the North needs you. Jon can hold the work as long as he is able, and I will find someone after that. He turns the cup slowly in his hands. I am telling you that you can go, Ned. I am not going to ask you to stay. Ned looks at him. That is new, he says. Robert makes a sound that lives in the neighborhood of a laugh. Yes, he says. I suppose it is. The godswood darkens around them as the last light leaves the walls. The city sounds drift over, the evening bells, the harbor, the 10,000 sounds of a living city going about its business without knowledge of what was decided above it, which is perhaps the most constant thing about any city, in any kingdom, in any age. The weirwood watches them sit together in the way it watches everything, and the night comes down over the red keep, ordinary and cold, and the two men sit in it the way they have sat in difficult things before, going back further than either of them could easily name. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the 7 kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and